Rise up, live joy your way. From emotional intelligence through cognitive distortions, certified life and wellness coach Kamini Wood is on a mission to help people see the magnificence of their own unique human spirit. Through these small bites of self-visualization and self-confidence, you can have healthy relationships, success in business and career, and live the life you want to live. Rise up, live joy your way.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Rise Up, Live Joy Your Way, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you for spending some time here with me. So I want to start with something that I've talked about before in other episodes, but it is just something that keeps coming up over and over again. So I just have to be honest. I do not agree that no contact is a trend. I think no contact is not a trend. It is not a flex. It is not a personality trait. I, in my client work, have seen it almost always as a last resort. Now, I'm not saying that it happens, I recognize that there are people that might just get upset about something and say, well, I'm going no contact with that person. I'm not denying that. But I think part of what's happening is we're losing traction around the heaviness of no contact. It gets flattened into these two extremes, right? So like on one side, if you go no contact, you're avoiding accountability. And then on the other, if you stay in contact, you're betraying yourself. And I think both of those actually can almost be oversimplifications of the situation. And oversimplifications can harm people who are already in this really fragile, confused state. And so I just am hoping that, we can, in the conversation, just somewhat slow things down and try to separate a few things. Like I want to try to separate avoidance, boundaries, and self-protection because they're all not the same thing. And if you don't learn the difference, what ends up happening, I think, is that sometimes we can exit relationships prematurely, or we might stay in relationships that are actually quietly eroding you. And it's important to recognize that neither of those really are necessarily the healthiest thing. So, I recognize that this is a very, it's a sensitive topic for a lot of people, but I think it's an important conversation to continue having because I do think that those people who are really in a situation of having to decide whether to go no contact or not, it's a very heavy and it's emotionally taxing situation to be in. So I just want to start with avoidance, right? Let's just start there. Avoidance is when we leave to escape discomfort. So sometimes disagreements feel really intense and conflict can feel very overwhelming. And repair feels like it's impossible or just way too vulnerable. And so we exit the situation. So avoidance could look something like blocking someone after one really hard conversation, or refusing to clarify misunderstandings, or maybe leaving because you felt embarrassed, or cutting someone off because you felt like they criticized you. Labeling just general discomfort as toxicity. So in avoidance, the nervous system is activated, but the environment itself may still be safe enough for repair to happen. Now, I also want to say that avoidance is not somebody being evil, okay? Like it still is a protective mechanism, but it may be almost over rotation into that protection, right? Where it's not always aligned, because in order to grow, sometimes staying and being slightly uncomfortable is required. So just think about that for a second. Like, have you ever left something because it just felt really uncomfortable and you just couldn't tolerate the discomfort? And it's okay. There's no shame in that. I think we all have done that. Especially if we felt embarrassed, maybe we just jetted out of wherever we were because we just wanted to avoid the whole situation. Now, I also want to make sure that we talk about boundaries, because boundaries are not walls. They're not exits. Boundaries are what I refer to as fences. They are limits. They sound something like, I'm not willing to discuss that. Or if you're going to curse at me, I'm not going to continue this conversation. Or I'm not going to tolerate insults. Or I need a little bit of space. I need a timeout right now before I say something that I'm going to potentially regret. So boundaries allow connection, but just under new terms. They're not trying to punish somebody. They're trying to create some structure. And they do require communication between people. They require the other person's capacity as well to respect what it is you're saying works for you and what doesn't. So if someone responds to a boundary with reflection, yeah, repair is possible. Continued conversation is possible. But if somebody responds to a boundary that you're setting with rage or mockery or retaliation, that's really important information for you, right? Because boundaries are attempts to actually create safety within the context of that relationship. So no contact is what happens when safety is repeatedly refused. So now if we step into the hardest category, which is self-protection, self-protection does become necessary when boundaries are repeatedly violated, when your reality is repeatedly being denied, where accountability is being reversed, right? So like everything, all that blame, it just constantly gets shifted back onto you. You're actually blamed for naming things that are harmful. Retaliation follows honesty. That's an example. Power imbalance prevents repair, or it's recognizing that all of those things are invitations to actually self-protect, because self-protection is not about discomfort. It's about being in a place of chronic destabilization. And what ends up happening when you're in those situations is you're walking on eggshells, or you're rehearsing conversations, or you're fearful of speaking honestly. You're also self-gaslighting and even maybe wondering if your reality is really a reality. And over time, you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You're just shrinking. No contact in those dynamics is not dramatic, like a dramatic exit. It's actually self-protection. It's the nervous system preservation that you're trying to engage in. I do think that it does get complicated because avoidance and self-protection to the outside world can look very similar, right? So both involve distance, both do involve us withdrawing, and both involve ending access. But the difference is the origin, right? Avoidance is a fear of discomfort, but self-protection is a response to a harmful situation. So how do you tell the difference? I think you can ask yourself a couple of questions. The first one is, was there a pattern? Did you notice a pattern over time? The second is, were boundaries attempted and were they respected? And then the third one is, was repair possible? So when you think of a relationship that might be popping up in your head that's in question, I think the way to sort of reflect on it is safety present? Was it consistent? Because consistency is a metric, and it's important to also bring up power dynamics, because power does distort the ability to repair. So for instance, if we're in a financially dependent situation, or if there's a legal entanglement, or if there's a parent-child history of overt control, or emotional intimidation, institutional leverage is another one. Accountability conversations aren't neutral in those situations because of the power imbalance. And the person with less power often gets labeled as avoidant if they try to step back, but stepping back in those situations might actually be the only available option in order to protect themselves. So in those cases, I would say no contact is not punishment. It's actually trying to remove yourself from what could be considered coercive dynamics. The other thing I really think that we need to bring and say out loud in these no contact situations is that when it is necessary, there is loss, right? And I don't think that many people go no contact and are completely numb to the fact that there's grief involved. So for people who have gone no contact with a parent, you grieve the parent you didn't get. If partner situations, you grieve the partner you hoped you were in relationship with. You grieve the relationship that never stabilized the way that you wanted it to. And it's important to recognize that self-protection and grief can coexist together. You can be clear on something and also still be sad or heartbroken at the same time. Leaving doesn't mean you did not care. It often means you cared enough about yourself to stop disappearing and to stop shrinking and to stop self-abandoning. No contact is neither inherently avoidant nor inherently empowered. It's really contextual. And I think that's the thing that gets lost when we are seeing something from the outside. We can jump to conclusions of what's going on for somebody in their life behind closed doors. And it's just important to remember that it's contextual for different people. And if you're going through it, it's, asking yourself, why did I leave? Did I leave to escape growth? And was there an invitation to return and potentially just sit through the discomfort? Or did I leave after actually putting a full faith effort in? Like, did I just have, like, I was exposed to repeated boundary violations and denied reality and just toxicity. That's discernment. And that's important, because when we are exhibiting that emotional maturity to evaluate that, we recognize that we're not just going to willy-nilly go cut people off. We're going to evaluate what's happening. We're going to look for if there's patterns. We try to set the boundaries. We try to assess safety. And we try to, at the end of the day, we have to choose alignment. And it's important to recognize that there is a difference between those. So I just want to offer a couple reflection thoughts, questions, for those who may have chosen to go no contact or somewhat contemplating it. It's just really asking yourself, have I attempted boundaries before I've chosen to go no contact? Was it possible? And also asking, what does staying cost me? And it's important to answer those without shame. Just notice what comes up for you. Avoidance is leaving to escape any type of discomfort, but self-protection is really about preserving your safety and your emotional well-being. If you'd like to talk about how coaching can help discern through some of these things or anything else that you might be working through in order to move yourself forward professionally or personally, feel free to reach out to me anytime at coachwithkamini.com. Till next time, stay well.
Thank you for listening to Rise Up, Live Joy Your Way. For more information, book a chat with Kamini at www.chatwithkamini.com or visit her website at www.kaminiwood.com. You can also find Kamini on Facebook or Instagram. Username It's Authentic Me. Thank you for listening.